Okay, so that's five past now. So I think what we'll do is make a start, and maybe a few people join as we come along, but hopefully they won't miss too much. So welcome everybody to this afternoon's webinar. I'm pleased to see so many people here. It's good to have this much interest. So what we're going to do this afternoon is talk about the GPU embedded CSE, so the GPU eCSE, a new software development program that we're running here. So I'm Chris Johnson. I run the eCSE program together with my colleague here, Lorna Smith. So the way it's going to work this afternoon is that Lorna's going to give the first half or so, and then I will take over and give the rest. So what I will do now is I'll hand over to my colleague Lorna, and feel free to ask questions. We'll try and keep an eye on the chat, but there'll be an opportunity at the end to ask questions. Lorna, if you just let me know when you want to move on slide, and I'll do that for you. So
if you go to the first slide, that would be useful, Chris. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. So as Chris said, the purpose of this webinar is to tell you a little about the eCSE program. Some of you may have had experience with the eCSE in the past. Some may be new. There is quite a significant change in the remit for eCSE this year, so hopefully this will help you understand what's allowed and what we're focused on. Okay, so can you move on to the next slide, Chris? So first of all, what is the eCSE funding program? So it funds staff effort. It funds technical staff to develop, to carry out software development projects. Now, different from previous eCSEs, the focus here is on software development projects that target GPU architectures. So that is quite a significant change. The aim is to allow us to develop software to improve the research that goes on these GPU architectures, particularly on UKRI's digital research infrastructure. So it's a comment that's worth making because one of the assessment criteria, or one of the things the panel will look at closely, is the value of the software development. So what sort of research is it enabling? What community is going to be able to benefit from the work? How big a community will be able to benefit? How easily accessible is the software at the end? So typically this might be to fund software development projects that look at improving or enhancing the code in some way. So it might be adding an additional functionality, it might be improving performance, it may be, I'll go in a bit more detail onto that, but it might be taking a code that's not been used in a GPU before to be able to utilize GPU, or it might be to improve an existing GPU code. Another significant change in the eCSE here is it is now accessible to all of UKRI's research councils. So the previous eCSE was EPSRC focused and at some points has had NERC involvement, but now this is open to software development projects that target research in the area of EPSRC, of NERC, of STFC, of BBSRC, and the other research councils. And it should be targeting research that's carried out on UKRI's digital research infrastructure. So there's a range of systems, things like the national tier 2 services, the national services such as ARCHER2, future exascale services, or the national AI services that are coming in. And as it says at the bottom, this is about funding staff effort. So it employs an RSE or a PDRA to do the software development. And again, it's focused on research anywhere within UKRI's remit. Okay, so there's two ways that individuals can become involved. You can either be, you can become involved as a co-I or a PI. This is often people who have an ownership of the code in some way, or some kind of impact around the code. So this might be, an academic who utilizes the code for their science, or who is responsible for the development of the code. In this case, you would be named as a co-I or PI. you know, at this point you wouldn't be doing the technical work, but you're there to support and offer expertise and to, you know, to manage the overall project work. Or it could be somebody who's looking to actually do the work, to be the technical members of staff in the project. This is typically a research software engineer or a postdoc who's looking to gain software development expertise within HPC. We quite often have PhD students who are coming to the end of their studies and are interested in developing their HPC skills or working further on the codes that they've been using during their PhDs. Again, it's a good opportunity here to fund that sort of work. Now, the panel will look to assess the team's ability to deliver on the project. So they'll look at the skills of the technical members of staff involved, but that won't be the whole picture. They'll look to see that the team as a whole can deliver on the project. So they'll look at the sort of support they're getting from PIs and co-Is and what sort of training's in place. The point here is that, you know, not everybody has absolutely ideal skills to carry out this work, but if the support mechanisms are in place to ensure that people can deliver the work, then that should be okay. Okay. So the programme is administered by EPCC through ARCHER2, the UK's national HPC service, but that isn't to say that projects are limited to research that targets ARCHER2. Or that targets the GPU component of ARCHER2. It's open to any projects that utilise GPU resources within the UK digital research infrastructure. Now, if it is the ARCHER2 GPU cluster that you're looking to access, then we can arrange for you to have suitable GPU resources to complete the work. If you're using an alternative system, you will need to make sure that you're able to gain access to the suitable CPU resources to do the work. It's worth calling out that this is not a way of funding CPU time to do the actual research or to do production runs. There are other routes available to do this, such as the access to HPC calls. The time we give here is to help with the development work. The embedded, the E in eCSE stands for embedded, and this means that staff can be embedded within the research community. So that means that they can be located anywhere at an institution around the UK. So the member staff may be based at an institution of the PI. There is the option to use one of our staff based up here in Edinburgh to support the work, to do the technical work, or it might be a third-party institution or some mix of the above. And the project can fund up to 36 person months of effort. That can be done in a flexible way that allows you to employ multiple people on the project at once, or to spread it slightly longer over a long period of time. There is a maximum calendar duration of 24 months. We'll be running a regular series of calls for proposals, 3 calls a year. So, you know, if you're feeling you're not prepared for the first call, you know, there will be others coming along. And one of our emphases is on encouraging early career researchers. Any of the RSEs that are involved are in the early stages of their career, and it's a good opportunity for them to develop software development skills. There is also the option for them to be named as co-Is and PIs with appropriate support from their institution. We run something called the Observer Programme, which allows early career researchers to come along to a panel meeting and observe what goes on. We usually have around 3 to 4 observers at the meeting. They can see how the review process works, and it's a good opportunity to see this, and hopefully that helps guide them when writing their own proposals. And we also seek feedback from them. There is a separate call open for observers. It's open and the deadline is the 27th of February. And as I've alluded to a few times, the way projects are selected is by an independent panel of experts who cover the remit or the scientific remit of the projects that have been submitted. Just a few examples of the sort of work that we're anticipating. This could be transforming a CPU-based code to a GPU code, so enabling it for GPU. Or it may be about making improvements to existing GPU codes, so looking at portability on a wider range of architectures, improving performance and scalability, improvements around sustainability and maintainability, or it might be implementing new algorithms within the code. But the point is it should be looking to improve your GPU-based software or create a GPU-based software to facilitate new research or to enhance existing research. And it also may involve enhancing existing workflows in areas around GPU software. So there's a range of options here. If you're at all concerned as to whether you fit within remit, do get in touch. Ultimately, if there's a bit of a mix of CPU and GPU development, it's important to note that the target is GPUs, and the panel will be looking to assess how well that, how well your proposal meets that requirement. So I think at this point I hand over to Chris, but for those of you who've looked at the eCSE programme before, the key points are that this is now open to a wider range of research councils and that it's targeting GPU architecture. Okay, Chris, I think.
Okay, yeah, I can go on unless anybody has any burning questions at this stage.
I think Ian has raised his hand.
We may have. Yes,
Can you
yes.
hear me?
Yep.
Yep, you can go for it.
Okay, just one question really at this stage. Given the remit has changed somewhat, are you keeping the same panel as you've had for previous eCSE calls, or are you inviting new members?
We're going to be inviting new members, so we'll be expanding the panel to include panel members from, the additional research councils.
Thank you.
There was a question there, how many person months are available for the first call? Or do you mean how many are available to fund? That hasn't been worked out yet, is the honest answer. So I'm afraid the answer is we don't know. We need to work that one out.
Okay, thanks. So I think what I'll do is I'll carry on now then, but please do ask questions as you go along, or certainly at the end, and there'll be an opportunity to do that. So what I'm going to do now is talk a bit more about the sort of mechanics of applying for a project and take you through the various steps. Some of these I think will probably be fairly obvious, others maybe a bit less so, so I'll just try and take you through everything. So there are a few steps. There are a few things that you can do now. Obviously, the very first step is getting together a sort of idea of what you want to do and the fact that you've got a code that needs working on and that you've got GPU development to do. But in terms of the sort of logistics, the first steps really are if you go into the ARCHER2 safe and go up to the top, you'll see eCSE funding there, and you can start a proposal in the safe. And if you do that, that gives you access to the form, so you can see what is required there. So it's a good idea to do that early on. It also gives us a sort of tag so that we know that you're interested, so that nearer the time we can get in touch with everybody who's started a proposal and remind them of the deadline and so on. So I would suggest if you're interested, just actually go in and start a proposal in the safe. That does not commit you to anything at this stage, but it's worth doing. The other thing that you can start doing now is start to invite other team members to think a little bit about who you might want to be co-eyes, who's actually going to be doing the technical work. The other thing that it's worth doing quite early on is starting to get costing information together. I'll say a little bit more about costings in a minute, but just for now I would say that costings are not needed for ARCHER2 CSE team members. So if you're using EPCC people, you don't need to put a costing in, and I'll show you in a minute a little button that you can press so that you don't need to do that. And that's because we get these internally, and it's not worth you asking us for the costings so that we can then send them back to you so that you can then put them in the form to send back to us. So it just saves a bit of effort. And also just checking the financial arrangements. So in particular, if you're using an RSE who's not part of the ARCHER2 CSE team, or is not part of your own team, then it's worth noting that we pay the money to the PI's institution. So if you're using an RSE from elsewhere, who's not in your own team or from EPCC, you will have to arrange to pass that money on. And you do need to just check that that all works with your department. We've had quite a few situations where that's the case and it's not been a problem, but you do need to just check that because you don't want it to be a surprise to your finance team or anyone else once the project is funded. Other thing you can do now is have a look through the proposal forms to fill in, and I'll show you what they all look like in a minute. But particularly to note that there's an online form where you fill in the logistics of who's going to be on the proposal, a little bit about the code and so on, which I'll show you in a minute. And then there's a separate Word document, which is the bulk of the proposal, which is where you write most of the text. So they're the main two things that you need to fill in, and just make sure that you look at both of them. The online form you see when you sign up, when you start a proposal in the SAFE. The Word document you can get from the eCSE pages in the ARCHER2 on the ARCHER2 website. The other thing that you should look through is the terms document. So once your proposal, assuming it's accepted, then you will receive an award letter, and that will refer to some terms. And those terms are non-negotiable. We just have fixed terms. So it is worth going through those and looking and checking with your department that you're happy with them and that your department is happy with them, because we can't change those. We've had, these are the same terms that we used under ARCHER2 for the eCSE. We've had 60 plus projects. Everyone's been quite happy to accept them, but it's still worth checking in advance, because you don't want that to be a surprise to your research department either. Read through the guidance document. It does have a lot of information there. It is worth going through. We're always happy to answer questions, even if those things are in the guidance document. So don't worry about asking us things and getting in touch via the ARCHER2 service desk. But I would say that it really is worth looking at the guidance document. It does go through every section. It talks about costings, it talks about travel, it talks about what should go in each section of the form. It talks a bit about PI roles and co-I roles. It should all be there. So do have a good look through that first, because it will help you. The other thing to do is that you might want to request letters of support to go with your proposal, and I'll talk a little bit more about those at the end. But there's something that you might want to do early on, because we can't accept letters of support after the submission deadline. And if you're getting letters of support from elsewhere, you don't necessarily have control over how quickly they reply. So it is worth thinking about that early on so that you can get those in. So they're the things to think about quite early on. The next steps then really are to actually complete the form. So complete the main proposal form, the Word document, complete the online form, and then when you've done that, you can link in the proposal form, a PDF of that, and any costing documents, CVs, letters of support, and so on. I'll describe all those again in a minute. The online form must then be completed. All project members have to accept the invitation. So if you invite co-Is and technical staff to join the project, they will receive an invitation from the SAFE. They will have to have joined the project by the deadline, or they're just not on the proposal. So you need to I would invite them early and chase them up if they haven't accepted. One quick note is if you make a mistake in the invitation and you invite somebody, you can get us to delete that, but actually the invitations expire after, I think, 30 days or whatever. So don't worry too much about going in and deleting invitations unless you're really changing who's going to be on the proposal. Invitations do expire after a certain amount of time, so they don't just hang around forever. And then, yes, so you must make sure that all relevant documents are attached, and then everything is submitted by 4 o'clock on 19th of March this year. And that's a hard deadline. After that, and you can't submit. So just be aware of that. So just have a bit of a look at what that all looks like. So there is a SAFE form. So that's this thing here up at the top. That's where everything gets linked into, and that's a fairly bog standard sort of online form that you fill in, and I'll go through how you fill that in a minute. And then there are various things that you attach to that. So as an absolute minimum, you will have a proposal document. So that's the form where you can get the template on the ARCHER2 website. So that's the thing on the left there. You fill that in, save it as a PDF, and attach it to your form, to your online form. Other things that you may attach, depending a bit on what your proposal is, are the other 3 documents here. So CVs are required for each of the RSEs. So anybody who's going to be doing technical work on the project and going to be funded to do technical work is required to add their CV to the form. And those CVs can't be added until the technical staff actually accepts the invitation. So you invite them first, they then joined, then you or they can add their CV. Other things, as I said, you can get letters of support. These are optional, but yeah, you can add them again as PDFs. And the final thing here is that for any staff who are being costed up, so there's any staff who are not ARCHER2 CSE staff, not EPCC staff, you will need to get a costing for those staff. And you should add that document as a PDF, and I'll talk a little bit about that document again in a minute. But they all need to be added by the deadline. So to begin an application, yeah, go to that eCSE calls page on the ARCHER2 website. That links into the templates, the guidance, and the terms document. Start a proposal in the safe. To start with, all you need to do is just enter a project title and subject area and research area, and just gets you started with the project. Actually, I think at the moment you can't actually add the subject area, but that will go in very soon. But you add the project title and the research area. So I mentioned the terms. So if you go to the eCSE calls page, it looks a bit like that on the left there. Obviously you can't read it all at that font, that size, but that's basically what you'll see. Now, if you scroll down a bit, you will find a link to, well, to lots of things, to the guidance, to all the proposal templates and so on. But one of the things there you will find is a link to the terms that I mentioned. Please do click on that, get a copy, show it to your research office, check that they're happy with that. Because they will need to be happy with it in order for your proposal to be accepted. Well, or in order for you, after the next stage, when your proposal accepted, you will need to accept those terms. So worth looking at now. So what I'll do is, in a minute, I'll take you through the actual the actual online form that you're to fill in. But to start with, I'm just talking here about the proposal template, which is the Word document that you get hold of with various sections to fill in. So it consists of 7 sections. Sounds like quite a lot, but actually the first 2 are pretty trivial: project title and PI name and institution. The only thing I would say there is use the same title in this form as you use on the SAFE, otherwise it gets a bit messy, but so just use the same title there. And then sections 3 to 7 are the sort of meat of the proposal, and I will talk about each of those sections in the next few slides. So section 3 is the first of the main sections, description of the code, and you've got up to 2 pages here. And basically this is where you tell us about the code. And this catches quite a lot of things. It's a bit of a catch-all for everything that you need us to know about the code. What is it for? What does it do? Who uses it? Also, how big is it? How is it structured? Basically, how complicated is it? How complex is it? And this is basically just to give the reviewers a feel for what size the problem is that you've got to deal with. How complex is this? Is this a 1,000-line code? Is it a 10,000-line code? Is it a 1,000,000-line code that you're going to be just working on a small part? Is it structured? Is this still sort of old legacy sort of Fortran code, or is it modern? Is it all sort of modularized? What is it like? What is it that you're going to have to do to it? I mean, maybe the part of your project will be tidying some of it up, but just give us a feel for that. What languages does it use? Does it have any particular dependencies, any particular libraries, compilers, or is it dependent somehow on other software? What's the code's status in terms of usage and performance? Within the the online form, there's a little bit where you talk about the number of users, but you can talk a little bit more in actually text here about the usage, and also performance. Now, there's lots of different ways in which you could be you can display performance, and that can vary quite a bit for GPU codes. It may include scaling. So, for example, if it's a multi-GPU code, how does it scale as you increase the number of GPUs? You may have profiling data from a profiler. It may be that you've got comparisons of how the GPU code works with the equivalent CPU code. There's various different things that you might provide here, but just to give us an idea of what the performance is like now, and then hopefully the rest of the project describes what you're going to do to it, maybe to improve the performance if that's what the project is to do. One thing I would say here is that you can include links. It's okay to include links, say to repositories, here or elsewhere in the form, or to things about the web pages about the code and so on. But make sure you include a summary in the text. You shouldn't really expect the reviewers to have to go clicking on lots of different links to find information. The form should be self-contained. Okay, so that's the code section. Next, you should put in the project objectives and success metrics. So you've got up to a page for this. So this is where you basically state what it is you're going to do and how you measure whether at the end that has been successfully done. So as a rough guide, we'd expect the number of objectives and associated success metrics to be probably 1 or 2 for a 6-month project, maybe 1 for a 3-month project, 2 for a 6-month project, something like that, and up to maybe 5 or 6 for a big project of 36 person months. That is really just a guide, and it depends obviously a bit how they're split up, or whether there's some more overriding objectives or whether they're smaller. So that really is just a guide, but just to give you an idea of the sort of thing that we'd expect. And then for each objective, we would expect to have an associated success metric. Obviously, they may split up slightly differently, but basically for every objective, we want there to be a success metric that would show ultimately whether it has worked or not. So success metrics, that they should be specific and measurable. So if you look, for example, I've just sort of made one up here that is not specific and measurable. So the following text might sound reasonable. It says, we will significantly improve the scaling of the GPU code compared with the existing code on a set of benchmark codes. Okay, so actually that doesn't read very well, but that basically sounds reasonable, right? It's the sort of thing you might want to do for a project, but actually it's not specific or measurable. Which codes exactly, how many of these benchmark codes, what improvements to the scaling do you expect in terms of your percentage or runtime? What problem sizes are you going to run? Those things should all be in there, so that at the end of the project, somebody could judge whether the objective has been met or not. Sorry, just 1 second. So I see there are a few questions. I'll maybe come on to those at the end, if that's okay. So next section is then the project overview, the technical information and work plan. So you've got up to 2 pages here. So this is where you basically describe what you're going to do. So, and you can describe this from a technical viewpoint. So this can involve and include technical information, but it should be understandable to someone who doesn't know the code specifically. Okay, so it should be written so that somebody who has the skills, has expertise in the subject area, perhaps, or is maybe a software developer, has expertise in software development. They should be able to understand it, but you should not expect them to have very specific knowledge of exactly what your code is. So you need to think about that as you're writing the technical section. It should include associated timescales. You should include a Gantt chart or equivalent of the work plan that shows the milestones, and the effort should be broken down by RSE. So if you've got more than 1 person working on this, you should break it down by person, and you should also break the work plan down into how many months each work plan is, weeks or months depending on the size for each work plan. And you should also include risks, and what their likelihood is, and any possible mitigation. Next section is sustainability, maintenance, validation, and availability of the codes. So this is up to a page. You should describe, how your code will be made available to users and how it will be maintained. Here you can state what coding standards will be used and so on. You should include any information on the licensing model. And this should really be described both for users who are wishing to run the code and anybody who's wanting access to the underlying source code. Final section here on impacts and benefits. So one page here. So you'd basically describe the potential impact of the science enabled by the project. So how will the impact be achieved? So some impacts may be realized at the end of the project. That's fine, but in which case you should describe the pathway to that impact. But just make sure that it's all in there and described. You should consider both the computational and the scientific benefits and who will benefit. Okay, so if you're applying for an eCSE proposal, the final deadline, as I said, is 19th of March 2024, and we won't consider late proposals. One thing to note is that for previous eCSE calls, so for the ARCHER2 eCSE calls, we had a separate technical evaluation that had to be in for an earlier deadline, and then later you submitted the final proposal where you attached your completed technical evaluation to it. That is no longer the case. We now just have one main proposal which includes the technical questions within that. So there is one submission deadline and basically one set of things to submit at the same time. So there is no separate technical evaluation or technical evaluation form. So any project team members must be invited to a proposal and have accepted the invitation via the SAFE before submission, as I mentioned earlier. Otherwise, they're not considered part of the team. So there are a number of allowable roles within a proposal. So there is, the main one is PI, so you can have one PI. You can optionally then have co-Is. They're basically people who are just members of the team who will be involved in some way. One thing we do say is that your co-Is should have a specific role. They should be there for a reason. Maybe they're offering technical expertise or they're managing in some way, managing the project in some way. But and their role should be described within the proposal. And there is a space where you add those that information in the form. Other role is the technical staff. So these are the people or the person who is going to be funded to do the technical work. So these are the RSEs or PDRAs who will actually do the work. There are other roles within the project. So you can have a contact. So this is somebody who's involved, who's named on the proposal, gets access to the proposal and will get all the emails from the proposals and so on. But they don't have a specific role in the project. And then there is a final role, which is member, and that is just that you join the project and you have access to see it and to update it, but you're not actually really involved in the project in any way. Sometimes that happens. You might have a research, somebody from a research office might join the proposal just to see it, for example. Technical staff should add their CVs and they can add their own CVs. All other project team members must provide a track record and describe what they will bring to the project. When inviting people, please do use the email address that they use in the SAFE. What happens is you put in their email address and it will send them an invitation email. They then log on to the SAFE and can accept that. So you should use the email address that they use in the SAFE. If they're not signed up in the SAFE yet, you can still invite them, but in which case you should use the email address that they intend to use when they sign up for the SAFE. So it's worth getting in touch with them first just to check what that is. And note that you cannot submit the proposal without the technical staff. Or in some cases you can add unnamed staff, and I'll maybe say a bit more about that in a minute. But you cannot submit a proposal unless there's a technical staff. Yes, technical staff are in there. It just won't let you do it. So what I'll do is I'll just give a little bit more. I see that there have been some questions, so I'll come back to that in a minute. I'll just do a little bit more, and then I will look at those before I show you the actual proposal submission. So just to talk here about costings. So what you should do is you basically do a costing the same way as you would for a UKRI research grant. You basically get together the 100% FEC value for each member of technical staff. We then pay 80% FEC, so fairly standard the way that research grants work. The funding only includes technical staff, so you cannot include any PI time or co-I time on that. There may be some cases where the technical staff member has the skills also to be a PI. That's okay, if as long as we're not so they can have the role of technical staff and PI, as long as we're not actually funding the PI time. So we're not funding the PI role, we're only funding the technical role. So funding only includes technical staff. You should include direct and indirect costs, but not any additional costs, so not PI costs or co-I costs. You should provide a breakdown of costs as a PDF. These days that tends to be work tribe, or your institution may use something different. As I mentioned earlier, you don't need to provide costings for ARCHER2 CSE staff. So travel is given separately from the costing above. The funds are limited there, so you should see the guidance. You can include travel for project members traveling within the UK to meet with each other as part of the project. That's fine. But one change that we've had here since the ARCHER2 eCSE program is that additionally, each RSE can be funded to attend one national or international conference. So you can put this in the proposal there. If your institution does not use full economic costing, please get in contact with us. Please get in touch in advance so that we can discuss how to deal with that. Okay, because this is the method that is used. So if you're not using that, we need to see if there's a way around that, and it depends a bit on the situation. One thing to note here, I think I mentioned this earlier, is that we pay the PI's institution via invoice. So if you're using a third party, that's the PI then has to pass the money on. Say, unless that's if it's a third party. That doesn't count if it's EPCC, where we can deal with that. We recommend that you use named staff where possible. The ability of the technical staff to complete the work is assessed. It is possible to add an unnamed member of staff if you haven't got the staffing in place, but obviously that means that the panel can't really see exactly who's going to work on it. If that is the case and you are putting unnamed staff on, then you should describe the skills that would be needed. And as I think Lorna mentioned earlier, the expertise of the whole project is considered. So the expertise of the staff together with the PI and co-I expertise is all looked at together by the panel. So in terms of costing, what you should provide is a costing document. As I said, you can get this usually via whatever your institution uses, usually a work tribe or so on, but they will be very used to doing this. So I've got a very, very much made up example costing here for a 12-month project. And what I've done here is I've just tried to show you what you need to add. So most costings there'll be a section on directly incurred costings, a section on directly allocated, and section on indirect costings. So what you do is you get that costing from your department, and what you should then do on the form is enter the total 100% FEC value, and the form will then work out 80% of this. So on the form, don't enter just the staff costing unless that's all you want us to pay. And don't enter the 80% value, enter the 100% FEC costing or FEC value, and the form will work the rest out. So it's just occasionally people go to put in just the staff costing, just the salary costing, and that's not what's required. It's the full costing you should put in. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I haven't been able to keep an eye on question. I'm just going to have a quick look.
Chris, I've been keeping up. I'm just answering Ian's question now, but I think I've answered all the others.
That I was going to say, I wonder if Lorna has already been answering them. So that's great. So I suggest everybody at some point looks at the chat, because you may see, if you haven't already, you may see questions and answers there come up that will interest you. So that's great. Thanks, Lorna. Now, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to very quickly show you what the submission looks like. So if you just give me a second to do some swapping around of sharing. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sort of pretend I'm submitting a proposal here. And what I've done is I've recorded a submission. It's very much made up here. And the reason I'm showing you this is not because I think you need to be shown how to fill in a reasonably straightforward form, but it shows you all the various sections, so you can see what's required. So I thought that would be useful, and we've done this in the past, and I think it's been useful. What I've done here is you imagine that I've already logged onto the SAFE. I've already gone to the eCSE funding section at the top, and I've clicked on create a new funding application. And now I'm at the stage where I'm just about to start a proposal. So here we go. Let's see if this works. Okay, so I go in there, I click on create. I then put in a project title. So I'm then going to edit the first section, which is just the bits on a research area and so on. So I'm going to just randomly select a research council. And then I have to give a short summary of the project, just enough to describe the project in a few sentences, and also enough just to show why it's part of that research council. If you think your project is in more than one research council, just select the main one and describe there how maybe it falls into others as well. And then I'm going to make myself PI just because I can. So click on that. I'm then going to add a co-I, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put myself in as co-I as well, because this is a silly thing to do, but I'm just doing it as an example. So I'm going to put myself as with a different email address as co-I, as if I was a different person as well. So that's just sent an invitation to that person. I'm then going to add the technical staff. So I'm going to put a little bit about my role there. So you put some meaningful text in that section. And then I'm going to say when the project starts. So I'm going to say that the project starts on 1st of July. That's sort of reasonable start date for this call. I'm then going to say this is going to be an 18-person-month project, and I'm going to make up a random cost. Now, because I'm an EPCC person, I don't actually have to put the costing in there, but I am going to put it in just so that I can show you how that works for other people. Then what you should do is talk about any existing funding you have at the same time, just so we can get an idea of what you're working on at the same time. Now, as an EPCC person, I would usually click that little box there, EPCC staff member, but I'm not going to now. And that means that you could miss the costing out, but I'm not going to do that because I want to show you how to put a costing in. Okay, so now because that's me, I've implicitly accepted it. Otherwise, we'd have to wait for the staff. Now, it's actually my role that I filled in there. It's actually forgotten that that has to go back in, but that's just being fixed as we speak. So now what I can do is I can upload a CV. So I'm uploading a dummy CV. And then I'm going to upload costings, upload the PDFs, update that. Next thing, there's some questions about the code. So hopefully your code has a more meaningful name than my code. So this is just where you put in how many users you think that you have. This can be an estimate, but you should then describe where this information comes from. You know, how have you derived how many UK users there are, and how have you derived how many global users there are? It may come from a website where this information comes. It may be that the machine you've worked on shows the stats, but it can be an estimate. But just describe where this comes from. You then explain what percentage of the users you think will benefit from this. So if you make an update to a code, it won't necessarily benefit all the users. So you make an estimate there of how many, and then just there's some places for giving explanations for all of that. Next, we come to travel. So this is where you put in your travel plan. Sorry, this guy's very slow at typing. So you should make sure that your travel plan is broken down by person, by trip, and that these should all be fully costed. And then just give a costing, and I'm just going to make up a number here. So next, we need to, and if you see it, you look at submit this application there. That's grayed out at the moment. We can't submit yet because there's still things missing. So I'm going to add a letter of support that I've got from some very helpful collaborator. So I still can't submit because I've not added the proposal document. So I'm now going to add the main proposal document. So that's the one you have the Word template for. Submit that. And now you can see it says that I've not selected the start date, so I can't submit yet. So I go back up and yep, there's a bit I've missed out. So I select the start date. So I'm going to say that the project starts at the same time as my effort started. So 1st of July. And then I'm going to work on this 100%. So I'm going to do 18 person months over 18 calendar months. That could be different. And now you can see that I'm able to submit because it's not gone grayed out. So I'm going to press submit eventually. So submit this application. Are you sure you want to submit it? Yes. And that is the proposal submitted. So I'm going to flip back to slides. Okay, so back to the slide. So that was basically a run through, and I said yeah, you can all fill in an online form, but the reason I wanted to show you that was just to show you basically what is required for the actual submission. So that's that you can see all the various bits and pieces that are needed. There we go. So I thought it was worth just giving just a little bit of information about things to watch out for. You know, we've run this program as the ARCHER2 eCSE, and before that the ARCHER eCSE for quite a while. So we've seen the sort of things that sometimes get missed, or some of the reasons why proposals don't get accepted. So I thought it was worth just running through a few of these. So you know, why would the reviewers not accept a proposal? Well, sometimes it's because the project doesn't look technically feasible. Perhaps it's, you know, it can't really be done within the time scale, or maybe it can't, the reviewers just can't see how it could be really done at all. Sometimes it's a poor estimate of effort. So sometimes proposals are over ambitious. You think you're going to get loads and loads done in what's actually a relatively short space of time. Or it may be under ambitious. You may be asked for loads and loads of time, but actually there's not really that much to do. Sometimes it's just missing the basic why or how. You know, why are you doing this, or how are you going to do this? We sometimes get a proposal that may be technically desirable, but it's missing the why. So, for example, a project may have a very clear plan for how you're going to reduce the time that a code takes by some large percentage. And on the face of it, that seems like an obviously good thing to do. But actually, you still need to say, why does this matter? I mean, who uses the code? Why do you want the code? Why do you need the code to go faster? You know, technically that may be obvious, but actually there's still a question as to, you know, why do you want to do this? Why should you be funded to do this? You know, what's it going to do? Why is the code important? And that can, surprisingly often you find people don't sort of say that. Sometimes the staffing is not suitable. You know, we are aware that you know, sort of across the country as a whole, really, we are still you're learning a lot of GPU skills, and we do understand that not everybody's going to have everything to start with, but there should be a plan of how to obtain these skills if you're not yet a GPU expert. So you do need to make sure that the staffing is suitable, and that where the skills aren't there, there's a plan for getting them. It may be that the project is not really analyzing risk properly. So you may, for example, you may have work packages that where there may be dependencies. How will work package 4 work if work package 3 isn't successful? What's going to happen? And that, you need to be clear on that. As I mentioned before about success metrics not always being quantified or not being specific and measurable, that can sometimes be the case. Sometimes letters of support are not very specific. One thing I would say about letters of support is letters of support are great, okay? But what's really good for letters of support is where you've got people who are, other collaborators or researchers who, people that actually need these improvements, and they make that clear in the letter. What they're going to do when you've made these improvements. Why this is important to them. So. Letters of support from people that are just sort of saying this project looks nice and yes, we support it, they're not really very helpful. What are these people going to do? Why do they need your improvements? Oh, the other letters of support, it may be sometimes from code developers. So if you're going to update a code, it's useful to have but the actual owners of the code are somewhere else. It's quite useful to have a letter of support from the code developers saying that they will implement, that they will put these or allow these to go into their repository, and that they will actually, these will form part of the main release. Other thing, do proofread it. Okay, I'll get a colleague to. We have seen proposals sometimes that still have things. The PDF comes in and it's still got change tracking and things showing, or the sentences that don't quite make sense. Do proofread it, because it does make it harder for the reviewers if that hasn't happened. And sometimes there's nothing specifically wrong with the project, but the details are just not quite well enough explained, or it's not quite convincing. So they're the sort of reasons why a proposal might not be accepted. I hope that if you put in a proposal, it is accepted, and we do we do make efforts to accept proposals if they're really good. I'll just move on to the final slide. Basically, the first GPU eCSE call is open. Do look at the timetable for future calls. We do expect further calls this year. Proposal deadline 19th of March at 4 o'clock. That's a hard deadline. As Lorna mentioned, there's also the early career observers call, which runs alongside that. The deadline for that is 3 weeks earlier. So if you're not submitting to the main eCSE call, and you're an early career researcher, do consider submitting to the early careers observers call to come along and watch a panel meeting. Best place to look for information on calls is the ARCHER2 website. And if you have any questions after this, then get in touch via the ARCHER2 support service desk, and we will answer questions there. So, any questions? I realize there's been lots in the chat, and Lorna has very helpfully gone through and been answering those, which is great. So I don't know if there's any more in the chat that. So I'm just looking through the chat there. So, okay, so I think probably the questions in the chat have been mostly gone through. I don't know.
So I believe I've answered every question. So if I haven't, okay, maybe people could put it in again.
That's great. Marta, I see you've got your hand up. Was that a question you wanted to ask, or?
Yeah, I have a question about the users of the code. So if the code doesn't have many users now, but one of the objectives of this proposal is to make it have more users, so yeah, facilitate, make it open source and things like that, which should we put that?
So Yeah, so that is good, and that is a good aim for the project, and we certainly do look out for that. Yeah, pathways to adding more users. It doesn't matter too much where that goes in the form. I mean, I would think in the impact section probably is a good place. Or it could be that where you're describing the present usage of the code in the technical section, but the impact would probably be a good place there, and you can just describe what the plan is for getting more users and why you'll facilitate that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, but it's certainly that is one thing that the panel often do look for is if there's a plan to increase the number of users. So that's a good point. Any other questions? Can't see anything else coming in, but do get in touch via the service desk. We're always happy to answer questions, even if you think it's something that we've covered, if you want clarification. And the other thing I would mention is that we're happy to have meetings with people just to go through things if it's easier to do things in person. So just get in touch if you want that. And thank you all for coming, and thanks to Lorna for giving the first half, and for answering lots and lots of questions as we went through, which is good. And just to get in touch if you have anything else you'd like to discuss.